year 2087, a Freedom of Information request resulted in the declassification of nearly 100,000 documents. These documents revealed the existence of a secret division formed as a skunkworks in the Central Intelligence Agency. This organization is known as the AORD and is still active to this day. The scope of the declassified documents covers the years of 1987 to 2037 and goes a long way to explaining the events that unfolded at that time, as well as the direction the path of history has taken as a result. Despite heavy redactions and documents left out entirely, the FOI release was one of the most shocking collections of data ever revealed to the public. These are those documents.
Case 513, Genetic Park. Location, creature, machine. Risk level 0, formerly risk level 4. Destroyed, some non-anomalous materials kept in storage. Background: billionaire entrepreneur and inventor began hiring geneticists and bioengineers for a new company in early 2000. Since he began by using his own money, it is difficult to draw out an accurate timeline of events in the early days of this happening. By Q3 that year, he had a total of scientists in his employ, and he officially formed a new business, which he called GenTech. For 7 years, him and his company developed their product in secret. By the time that Mr. began seeking inventors, he had already burned through $1 billion of his own net worth. It was when he finally began showcasing his company to investors that GenTech first took our interest. His pitch, which was mercifully only done twice for 2 separate groups, was too ridiculous to believe, and for this reason we were not able to crack down on it right away. If we had someone on the inside of one of those conferences, it would have saved the agency a lot of money and manpower. His business plan, as it was presented, was essentially to make a real-life version of the film Jurassic Park. Since there were potential copyright issues, GenTech chose the name Genetic Park. The idea threw most of the investors, and at that time our analysts assumed this was because they didn't believe GenTech could actually follow through. We did not know that had created an actual Comsac Nathus to show to the investors, and since each of the potential investors had signed an NDA, there was no way for us to know how serious the situation had already become. Naturally, a substantial amount of money was invested into GenTech, a grand total of $1 billion. With this money, Mr. purchased a small island in the Pacific Ocean, some 15 miles off the coast of... On paper, the park had begun construction. However, our analysts were still under the impression that this endeavor was a scam. Since it's not the agency's objective to enforce laws, we sent the dossier over to the FBI with a low-priority label, as the crime had, under our false presumption, already been completed. Years passed before the FBI got around to investigating GenTech, and they only did so because the investors had contacted them. The investors said they hadn't heard from Mr. or GenTech's representatives for over 2 months, and they were now worried that they had been bilked. On January 29, 2000, the FBI began its investigation, and the case was assigned to a small task force of primarily forensic accountants. They couldn't prove that GenTech wasn't working on a theme park of genetically recreated dinosaurs from the numbers alone, so the team shipped off to the coast of with warrants to search the private land under international law. The team spent a total of 3 days on the island before the lone survivor escaped by stealing a helicopter. Upon her return to the mainland, Agent reported her findings and the deaths of her teammates. This report was instantly flagged as a priority by our sniffer, and in a matter of hours, our team had made its way into land to contain the spread of information. The report Agent gave over the phone stated that there were no dinosaurs on the island, and that it was much worse than that. Furthermore, she described in detail a number of genetically engineered chimeras and abominations that seemed to be mostly combinations of people with other animals, including some with very incompatible biologies. A full copy of that phone conversation is available under Case Dex 432. On May, AOA 356 Squad was sent to take over the island. while all investors and other parties with in-depth knowledge of Gentech were terminated at the earliest convenience. The 356 did a cursory investigation during their occupation of the island. Based on the findings of this investigation, the agency determined it was best to claim Gentech's research logs and databases, but to fully destroy the island and its contents. Based on the reports and recorded footage from the 356, this decision was approved, and the island, domestic and foreign offices, and the research labs of involved scientists were fire-wiped. As of July, there has been no call to apply the research captured from Gentech for use in the agency, and all records of Jurassic Park and Gentech are stored under clearance and may only be accessed with unanimous administrative approval from the Directorate. Because of the difficulty of acquiring permission for multiple nuclear strikes on the island, it is frankly unlikely further research of Jurassic Park's technology will ever be approved. AOA 356 Captain's Debrief. Sure, Captain Marshall of the AOA 356 Squad. It is now July 2000 at 0500 hours. Yes, on arrival to the island of it was immediately clear that something was badly amiss. The port, which we had planned to strafe with machine gun fire from the helicopter before landing, was completely abandoned. It was off-putting, and put the entire team on edge as it began to feel like we were expected. We were wary of an ambush, but we found it was an empty port, an empty security desk, and an extremely large gate with the words Jurassic Park written across it. The logo seemed to be aping Jurassic Park, but instead of a skeletal T-Rex, it seemed to be an open-mouthed human face emerging from a pile of mud. This logo was just about everywhere, and the other members of the squad agreed that it didn't make sense that the design was allowed to become the main logo of the park. It was weird. So right off the bat, we knew this place was going to be screwy, and we felt there was a good chance that either A, everyone who worked at this park was waiting for someone to show up to attack them, or B, whatever they were working on here had killed everyone. We continued on after clearing the security booth. There was nothing in there, to the point that I believed that the building had never once been manned. They clearly planned to put someone in there, but it was completely empty, and the floor still looked brand new. Rather than finding a way to open the enormous gate, we climbed over, since I didn't want to let anything inside of the gate out into the ocean. If it hadn't happened already, of course. And on the other side of the gate, we could see an enormous jungle, with a series of trails cutting through it. The scale of the place was much larger than any other conquest me or my team had done at the 356, and it was a bit intimidating. That's when J spotted the car down below us. From the top of the gate, it almost looked like an actual car, if it hadn't been for the hair. Since we'd spotted it before rappelling down, we tried shooting it right off the bat. The car didn't move, but it did make an unsettling sound. It was kind of like a person trying to sound like a car horn, if the person was very, very sick. The car also began to bleed. Eventually there was a considerable amount of blood on the ground, and we decided to risk coming down and checking it out. It didn't look any better from up close. There was patchy brown hair covering the top, except for a square moon roof which was made of veiny, transparent skin. The body of the car was blanketed in sunburnt pink skin and dark brown skin on the interior. The headlights were eyes that had some kind of bioluminescent light source within them. The steering wheel didn't turn in the normal way. It sort of twisted and wrapped the skin at the base around itself. It was clear much of the structure was made of bone, as all the connections in the support structures felt like joints. The worst part were the wheels. The tires seemed to be made of keratin, and the tread pattern was uncomfortable to look at. Furthermore, the fingernail tire was wet, and the liquid seemed to be cerebrospinal fluid. One of my team members told me there was no way for a living thing to evolve a wheel, since having a part that spins all the way around would, by necessity, cut it off from the circulatory system. He made a guess that the spinal fluid was acting as a hydraulic pump to make the fingernail tires spin. He very badly wanted to pull the thing apart, but I vetoed it. Now that we knew more or less what this thing was, and that it was dead, we decided to search the abandoned welcoming center. The building was basically an enormous queue line with a gift shop attached to it.
We cleared the building for threats and found a bunch of dead park employees who seemed to have been mauled and half-eaten. Wasn't anything we were surprised about. Most of the time we spent in there was looking through the gift shop. A lot of the merchandise at the gift shop was toys that looked like balls of bloody flesh with mouths and eyes coming out at every angle. There was one that seemed to be a mixture of a cow, a rat, and a person. There was also one that looked like a human being morphed into the shape of a brontosaurus, or whatever those long-necked dinosaurs are called. There was even a toy car. That's not even half of them, but a lot of these toys we ran into the real versions of, so just assume there's a toy for basically every horrible thing in the report. After we felt we'd poked around enough, we went through the queue line and came into a large garage. To my personal disgust, it was full of cars. The whole building smelled like a barracks, mixed with a zoo and a morgue. It was disgusting. Squad member wanted to take a look at a living car, and since they hadn't attacked us despite the overwhelming numbers advantage, I allowed it. Apart from the whole thing being very warm, Vis noticed that there was a radio in the center console. It was essentially a voice box attached to a kind of display with knobs or dials that seemed to be based on kneecaps. Upon turning it on, we heard the introduction tape. That made it on all of our recordings and was transcribed here on 1-3. 1-3 audio log. Welcome to Genetic Park. And this is my view of perfection. A little slice of transcendence for your viewing pleasure. I understand you may be a bit surprised by the nature of this vehicle, but don't worry. It's entirely unable to move on its own. We engineered it so that all its motor functions are controlled by the steering wheel and pedals. Furthermore, we made it so it will only experience joy from being driven. That way we could make sure it stays cooperative. So please, enjoy the warmth of our homemade carmen as you traverse the park. There are many sights yet to be seen. That put us on edge a bit more than the half-eaten bodies. However, suggested we take the car since we had so much ground to cover. There was some resistance from the rest of the squad, as they thought they may be infected with some kind of mutation and then we'd be terminated. I told them we would have been infected the moment we stepped on the island, and if that was the case, we'd be terminated either way. We might as well die without sore feet, is what I figured. Looking at it that way, the team agreed to take the vehicle. Oh yeah, the team has no qualms about dying. It's part of the job. And they all know they were built for it. Right, where was I? Turned the key to start the car, made some kind of moan. Definitely wasn't in pain. As we drove forward, it made a similar moan, but more consistently. It was sort of like someone trying to make the sound of a car, but, well, I'll say it was off-putting and leave it at that. As we drove, we would occasionally pass an exhibit, or a habitat, I suppose. And when we did, the pre-programmed voice from the radio would activate. The first one we came upon was the cow-person hybrid we'd seen a toy version of in the gift shop. Transcript should be in 1-5 for that one. 1-5 audio log. If you look to your left, you will see the future of meat production, what I call the auto cow. This hybrid of bovine, rodent, and primate DNA is the ideal meat beast. It can eat its own weight in vegetable matter or other refuse every single day, and it grows just as fast. The best part comes at the end of its life cycle, which is only a year from its birth. Once it hits its prime age, a time-released process we've programmed into its gene expression activates, and the auto cow will slaughter itself. Now that's what I call convenient. As we drove by, we saw one of the cow people suddenly lurch and begin screaming. Then two small arms with sharp claws emerged from little holes in its neck and slashed its throat. The thing kept screaming and twitching as it bled out, which took a considerable amount of time. Its scream was human-like. I'm absolutely sure it was part human. We kept driving in the direction of the main resort building, which we had imaged from the air. Occasionally we'd come upon a rest stop or a restaurant. Most of them were either abandoned or full of mutilated corpses. However, we did find one with 3 survivors in it. We eliminated them before continuing the drive. They were just about the only normal people we ran into. After this, we ran into a pivotal tactical decision. As we were driving through one of the main safari lines, a group of creatures emerged from the bushes. They looked like elongated people with giant anteater claws and spider-like mouths. They circled the car on all 4s with long, bent limbs. The team had their weapons aimed and requested permission to engage, but I thought it would be better to wait for them to strike. These things looked dangerous, and they were clearly very fast. My instincts told me it would be better to avoid direct conflict if possible. 1-9 audio log. Behold, a wondrous predator of my own invention. With the speed of a cheetah, the deadly efficiency of a tiger, the insatiable hunger of a praying mantis, and the wisdom of a man. These beasts I lovingly call rippers would absolutely dominate any ecosystem on the planet. They can eat anything and survive temperatures ranging between -30 and 56 degrees Celsius. Not only that, but we made their skin all but impenetrable to anything but the highest caliber firearms. The Ripper's skin is equivalent to level 5 body armor. Truly an amazing life form, but still far from the perfection I envisioned. Oh, and don't worry, we've designed them to avoid the carmen and their passengers, so you have nothing to fear. But do remember that flash photography is strictly prohibited. If we hadn't decided to drive one of those disgusting things, we would have been mauled, and we likely didn't have the firepower to take down a pack of those things. It was a lucky break that saved our lives, and saved the agency from unnecessary expenditure. After a few moments of the Rippers looking at us hungrily, they leapt back into the jungle and ran away, presumably after some other food source. We didn't see anything else particularly dangerous, well, at least in the immediate sense. There wasn't a clear and present danger on the way to the resort. We did, however, see a few more of these abominations. The descriptions of them will be in the audio logs. I'd rather not revisit it since it doesn't really matter to the end result. Thank you. 1-12 audio log. When I first began designing Genetic Park, I had originally intended to make dinosaurs. What a trivial and fruitless endeavor that would have been. I look back at the me I was back then and scoff. Why make dinosaurs when I could make something better? That's when I came up with the idea for the Humantosaurus. Anyone with even a passing knowledge of paleontology should recognize the basic shape of the Brachiosaurus. But of course, I've made some very important changes. Mine is much more beautiful, is it not? 1-15 audio log. This was one of my earliest endeavors, the legendary Manticore, a beast with the tail of a scorpion, the body of a lion, and the head of a man. A rather simple thing, with very little aesthetic value. At very least, it looks better now than the first version, which was still covered in disgusting fur. I've kept this around as a reminder that every misstep brings us that much closer to true perfection. 1-17 audio log. It was when I first read the Book of that I decided to aim higher than simple recreations of already extinct animals. Such animals have already been proven inadequate after all. They're all dead, aren't they? This little beauty is my attempt to recreate the organism featured on the cover of that book. 100 legs kicking, 100 arms clawing, and a dozen faces crying out for transcendence. I call it the starfish, as I don't think it's good enough to deserve the name of as it was in the book. Try as I might, I could never quite replicate the beauty of that illustration. I do think I came pretty close, though. Speaking of the Book of why not give it a read? It's available for purchase at every merchandise shop throughout the park, and there's a copy in the nightstand in each hotel room. 1-23 audio log. Ah, the Megamouth, a combination of 30 people's worth of limbs and flesh, all contorted into the shape and function of a massive, all-consuming maw. An interesting tidbit about the Megamouth, it's actually more efficient for us to continue producing more of them rather than to feed them enough food. As you might expect, the daily nutritional requirements for such a beast is rather massive. So, rather than spend the extra money on meat to feed them, we've decided to just make new ones when the old ones die of starvation. It may seem a tragedy for such a beautiful thing to be destined to die of hunger, but it's important to remember that at a chemical level, the difference between life and death is nearly indistinguishable. It's the sacred cycle of all life forms, consuming and being consumed. Soon enough, technology and holy will allow us to combine life and death into one vision of perfection. Once we'd gotten through the safari portion, we entered the amusement park. There was roller coasters, carousels, bumper cars. All of them were alive. At least at some point in the past, they were. It seemed like the Ferris wheel had been dead for quite a while, since it was gray and its muscles were falling apart. There was a large amount of slug-like things gathered around it. I imagine those slug things were their idea of a cleanup crew, but there was nothing on the audio tour about them. Regardless, the smell of the place was repugnant, so we didn't stay any longer than we had to. We did, however, notice a number of people, but they definitely weren't normal. Each of them was standing at the front of the queue line for their respective ride. They just stood there with their mouths wide open, like they were in pain. They didn't move at all, even as we passed by. I guess they were waiting for guests to arrive. It's pretty clear they weren't a threat, but we went ahead and killed them anyway, just to be safe. Oh, right. My squad wanted to make sure I mentioned this in the report. There were food stalls as well, and it's just as bad as you'd imagine. Some of them seemed to have beef, but that was probably from those cow people. Some of them were self-serving, as in they could cut a piece from themselves, cook it, and try to serve it. We inspected one closely, but it started screaming at us and trying to give us a plate of cooked meat. It never stopped screaming as far as we could tell. It was still going as we finished clearing the amusement park. No, we didn't notice any kind of food source for it. I guess there was something buried underneath it. Either that or it was using photosynthesis somehow. After that, it was a short drive to the resort. We just barely started to see it through the trees when we noticed that the ground beneath us had changed. It still had trees and grass growing out of it, but it wasn't dirt anymore. It was skin. Pinkish, human-looking skin. Caucasian, basically. The closer we got to the resort, the more sparse the grass and trees became. In their place were arms and legs and other types of appendages I can't really explain. It sort of looked like one of those underwater plants, like in coral reefs. Not quite like that, though. It was, I don't know, it seemed like it was probably human. By this point, we could see the resort. It was alive, too. The whole thing was made out of skin and bone and muscle and fingernails and hair. Still kind of looked like a regular building, though. At a distance, you wouldn't even be able to tell. Most of the squad expressed their dissatisfaction for the assignment at this time, since we knew we had to go in there. There was another audio tour thing when we got up to the resort, too. Just more cult shit, basically. You didn't pay much attention to it. Audio log 27. Welcome to the Resort and Visitors Center. Be sure to take the tour of our birthing facility and genetic domination center. Each guest who takes the tour will gain free entry to the Museum of Life. Enjoy your stay and learn all about our final purpose as living things. We hopped out of the car and turned it off. It made another noise when we deactivated it. It sounded something like despair and outrage. But it was cut off after a second. Did a quick visual inspection of the surroundings and the outside of the building. Decided to breach the front atrium area. At this point, there was no sign of anyone having noticed us, much less offering any kind of resistance. There was no reason not to start with the biggest room. Furthermore, there was some concern that breaking the windows would have some negative reaction from the building itself. Following standard protocols, we entered the facility and claimed the lobby area. It was a large entry room, clearly designed to impress new visitors. The interior wasn't quite as horrific as we expected, but the walls were veiny and red. It wasn't wet or bloody, though it did smell like a slaughterhouse.
The middle of the room had an enormous curving staircase around the prize exhibit in the center, an enormous beating heart. It was fair to assume it was the heart of the building. Oh no, we didn't interact with it at all. We made an effort to skim through some of the documents we found, but they were largely hotel administration forms and nothing of particular substance. Afterwards, we started going room by room. We found a lot of dead bodies in staff-only areas. They all seemed to have died from self-inflicted wounds. At that point, we hadn't seen what became of the other employees, so it made us put up our guard. We couldn't be sure it didn't take some kind of monster that makes you brain dead. We know the protection only works so well. Our squad was present at the project, so we were particularly sensitive to mind threats. The majority of the rooms had very little in them. Occasionally we'd open what we thought was a janitor's closet or something and find a room full of organs with squishy floors. There was still no sign of resistance, though, and no sign of the people that were supposed to be working here. That's when we got to the admin room. We heard them before we saw them through the transparent skin on the door. It sounded like some kind of chant, like a ritual, so naturally we got our asses in gear and stormed in to try and stop it. When we knocked the door in, we saw a large control room with curved communal desks. It was full of people sitting at their computers and presumably keeping the biological and electrical systems in order. They weren't actually chanting, they were just saying work over and over again. They didn't react to our orders or even seem to notice when we shot them. After we put down 4 or 5, we realized they weren't a threat, so we decided to check them out a little closer. They seemed to be mostly normal people. They all looked different, and they all were wearing different clothes, though the clothes were worn and sweat-stained. The main difference was that their chairs were grown into them, and their skin had fused to a number of intestine-like tubes. That, and they didn't blink. All of them had constantly pouring tears, to the point that their shoulders were all wet. And of course they were also saying the word work in unison every couple of seconds. We didn't know exactly what they were doing on the computers, so I thought it would be wise to leave them alive, at least until we got out of the building. I didn't want to find out what would happen if we were inside that thing when it died. There was a few more empty rooms after that, one of which was clearly a little temple of there was copies of the Book of everywhere in the park, but this altar was definitely the real deal. Most members of the Church of just cut up a bunch of dead bodies and make their altars, but this thing, it's more professionally done, I suppose. It was alive, too, but it didn't seem to be attached to the building like a lot of the other elements were. There must be some religious purpose to it, but I don't really know much about the Temple of other than that they love piling up flesh. We tried to see if there was any documentation of how they were making all this stuff. Obviously, it was above and beyond any genetic engineering available in the public market. I imagine a lot of these aberrations shouldn't be able to survive more than a couple of days, with the way they were grown. There wasn't a whole lot, so we followed the signs to the birthing center. The door to the birthing center was bulging at the edges, and blood was just streaming out of the bottom of the door. The team drew straws for who would open it, and lost. He walked up to the door, pulled the handle, and the door flew open, letting out a huge pile of meat and bodies. You ever see someone try to chop open a beached whale? How pressurized it gets? And when they finally puncture it, their chainsaws or machetes, the organs sort of blast out and cover everything. It was a lot like that. Anyway, got knocked off his feet, and he was separated from us by the pile. He actually ended up partially buried under it, but we didn't really have time to go get him because there was this scrambling and screeching coming from inside the room. We saw over the pile of meat that there was one of those rippers on top of the pile, and it was still alive. It looked like its spine was broken, and it was way, way fatter than the ones we'd seen before. But it was alive, and it was trying to claw through the pile of meat to get out the door. We tried shooting it in the head, just pissed it off, and we started lobbing grenades into the room. Seemed to be doing something, so we just kept doing that. Might have been something else alive in there, but we sent a good 10 grenades into the room, and there wasn't anything alive after that. That Ripper thing took a good 8 grenades before it stopped screeching.
We sent in the last two just to be sure. One of those things would wreak havoc on a normal battlefield, I'll tell you that much. After that, we noticed was screaming from the other side of the pile, so we climbed over and dug him out. Going through the pile, it was composed of a lot of monsters we'd seen in the safari, and some more I didn't recognize. There was regular people in there too. At least they looked like regular people. All of these things were largely in pieces or smushed up. We made our way into the room on the pile of bodies. Couldn't really see a whole lot, because it was just stuffed with meat and dead things. There was about a third of the room that had spilled out when we opened the door, so we were able to put the pieces together a bit. On one side of the room, there seemed to be a hopper, which was full of naked people. Just regular people, I imagine. And a lot of them looked exactly the same. Clones, I figure. On the other side of the room, connected by a big organ, was a little tube kind of thing, and that tube, we figure, was pumping out all these things. The animals. There seemed to be a lot of electronic controls and a really big server rack along the east wall, but we didn't dig our way in far enough to try and figure out how it fit in with the organic bits. The team decided we should get out of there in case it started spitting out more shit. There was a few more rooms to clear after that. More than a few of them had those workers. Most of the building was clear though, and there wasn't any more hostiles as far as we could tell. We decided to go in the office last, because we figured if anywhere was going to have any information, it would have to be there. The security office door was incredible. It was clearly designed with preventing a breach in mind. It was lucky our C5 worked, or else we would have had to break in through the wall from the outside, and that probably would be just as difficult. The room itself was just the same as any of the other rooms. Hard floors, veiny walls, regular furniture. The desk, though, was very different. It looked like he was connecting himself to the building and the computer system. The desk and the chair both had ports that we assume he was putting his appendages in. We didn't try reaching in them, but a peek inside of one of them revealed a large amount of sharp, quill-like little nerve endings, some kind of plasma jelly. There was 5 in all, 2 at hand level, 2 at foot level, 1 right down the middle. Likely stabbed into his appendages and connected the nervous system of the building, and maybe the whole island, to his nervous system. We poked around his computer, but we couldn't connect to it or even power it on without sitting at the desk, so we just cut the whole thing out of the desk and packed it up to carry home. Looking around the office, we also found some kind of panic room or escape tunnel, but once again it required an extremely invasive biosignature to open. It did seem that he used it though, because there was a large puddle of blood dripping out of the connection by the vault door. There was also a whiteboard, a pretty massive one, and every square inch of it was covered with chicken scratch. A lot of different ideas for new creatures, a lot of prayers to and enormous drawings of this pile of meat covered in eyes and mouths and tendrils. We have pictures and videos of all of it if you want to see it, but it wasn't much helpful information in terms of the mission. No clues as to where all the living people had gone. No written evidence of what had gone down during the construction of this place or anything else. Since we figured this could cut and run, we tried to find where the panic room led to from outside. There was no access to the roof, but since there was no visible helipad on the building in any of the recon materials, we didn't even try to climb up. Instead, we took a closer look at the outside of the building to see if there was a hidden exit. We didn't find anything noticeable, so I imagine there must be an underground tunnel, as I outright didn't believe the door in his office was just a panic room with no exit. I used my scanner to search for any structures under the earth, and we found one about 20 feet onto the north side of the building. We followed along, and it led right to the Museum of Life. Unlike the resort and visitors center, the Museum of Life seemed to be a regular building. Wood and all that. At least from the outside. We went around it to scope it out first, and I noticed there's no emergency exits. In fact, the only way in or out was the front door. It was a pretty massive building, so already we figured it was some kind of trap. We just didn't know if the trap was specifically set for us or for the guests that were supposed to go in. Regardless, we did our due diligence, headed in on tiptoes. The inside also appeared to be a normal building, and it was.
as it described, a kind of museum. It all led in a winding path past different exhibits. At least at the start of it, it wasn't even that unusual. There's a whole section about the primordial world and how life started. That's when the voice kicked in and scared the hell out of us. Must have been a motion sensor we didn't notice, or, well, probably the museum's system was alive and it could smell or feel us there. Anyway, it was just like in the car, with as the tour guide. Audio log 154. Life. Beautiful life. The universe's way of looking back at itself. We used to believe that life began due to a series of coincidences in a primordial soup of enzymes and protein. Of course, now we know the truth, that life began as a sick with as its champion. Our predecessors in biology did get at least one thing right, though. Life did indeed get its start through chaos and randomness. We'd almost gotten used to how normal the building looked when he came in with the temple of bullshit. It just got worse as we slowly worked our way through the museum. The next room was just a bunch of pictures and dioramas about violence in the animal kingdom. Hyenas eating a wildebeest alive, storks pushing their chicks out of the nest, that kind of thing. Audio log 155. It's said that nature is red in tooth and claw. While that is true, it misrepresents the reality of what life is at its fundamental level. Nature isn't just red in tooth and claw, it's all red. From toe to tip, the violence is consistent throughout. Bloodshed, predation, defecation, love, death, and even birth. All are violent, all are unclean, all are bestial and rabid and wrong. All are red. And it is only when we accept this truth that we can finally shed the scales from our eyes and see the beauty of it. The entrance to the next room was outlined by a creeping red muscle-like tissue. It was similar to the skin around the resort, or the veiny walls on the inside, but this stuff was wet. Bloody, really. We tested it to see if it would react to pressure or movement. Basically, we wanted to see if it would just suddenly start trying to eat us as soon as we stepped into the room. Didn't react to anything we did to it, but we didn't know for sure it wasn't just waiting for something, even as we walked in. The exhibits there were basically just cut open bodies and dissected organs of various kinds. They were real. There was dead people in there, chopped to pieces just to show off the meat inside. Animals too, but only a couple. They weren't even preserved or anything. They were just slowly rotting behind glass cases. Well, except for the touch exhibit. That one didn't have a case. Needless to say, it smelled fucking terrible in there. I don't know how we'd managed not to notice it in the first few rooms. Maybe it was something the meat on the floor and the walls was doing, preventing the smell from leaking out. I don't know. It's possible we were just too high on adrenaline to notice another rotting meat smell in this place. Audio log 156. Flesh. Flesh and blood. Not every living thing has bone or tendon or hair or bile. Those are wonderful additions, of course, but they're not truly necessary. Everything, however, has flesh and blood in some form. Plants and fungus even, though some of them let their blood flow through each one of their cells in a constant flux. Flesh and blood are universal. But why this form? Why didn't life develop in some other way? Was it because it's more delicious? Was it simply because of its beauty? Well, I'll show you. And believe me, the answer to that question is more simple than you might expect. So simple and yet so powerful. I truly envy you, to be about to learn the answer of life's form and purpose for the first time. How I would love to experience that awe and jubilation one more time. I don't know exactly what was in the next few rooms since the IH-8 protector kicked in, limited our sight and hearing. There was certainly a lot of temple of stuff, and from what I could see around the blurred parts of my display, there was likely some videos of extra-dimensional geometries. A couple of the guys threw up. I guess they tried a little bit harder to look at it than I did. Yeah, don't worry. I already gave it to him about that. I don't know if the audio that was piped in is actually a hazard. because the parts that leaked through just seemed to be talking about his usual nonsense. It seemed like the IH-8 protector just automatically blocks the audio as well if it sees a dangerous image. Not sure if that's a bug or a feature, but it made it pretty fucking hard to figure out where to go. Basically had to inch through the rest of the museum. Audio log 157. Blood. Flesh. The face of God. And why wouldn't it be created in its image? Teaches us flesh is all. At some point the IH-8 kicked off, and as per protocol, I told the team not to look back just in case it was glitching out. Must have been 5 or 6 rooms we moved through half blind and deaf. Once we could see again, the whole building was flesh and blood, just dripping blood and bile from the ceiling, everything throbbing and wet. There was no more exhibits or glass cases. It was just a long hallway that looked like the inside of a whirled-up dead animal, and it ended in a door made of hair and bone. The audio tour put us on guard for what was ahead, especially since we already knew there was only one exit, and it was the way we came in. We were ready for a fight. Audio log 165. And thus ends our tour of the Museum of Life, and with it, the end of your life as well. Surely by now you must see the beauty and importance of our work here at Jurassic Park. It was never just about making fascinating creations of flesh, but the critical mission to usher in the greatest form of life the universe has ever seen. For nearly a decade I've toiled, combining the very cutting edge of science and occultism to reach this point. I've lied, I've cheated, I've stolen, I've killed, and it was all worth it. For I've done it. I've completed my objective. I've created the pinnacle of life's form and function. I've made the perfect organism. Now, step through the door and witness its divine beauty. Gaze upon perfection and offer yourself unto it. For with our flesh we shall feed the future. To eat and to be eaten. The holy cycle of life and death. We approached the door as quietly as we could. We could only guess what that freak would consider the perfect organism, but we had our ideas. It was certainly going to be the most dangerous thing on the island. We all made our peace before blowing the door, fully expecting to be killed, and hoping the self-destruct function on our armor would be enough to eliminate the threat. On breaching the door, we saw it. An enormous mass of meat, covered in eyes, mouths. Giant spiked tongues moved it around the large space at an unbelievable speed. It was huge, too. Maybe the size of 4 elephants. Took up an entire quarter of the room, and the room was basically an indoor soccer field. Another corner of the room was an enormous pile of hundreds of human bodies. Some of them clones, some of them not clones. We started firing, hurling explosives and grenades. None of it did anything. Thing didn't even react, didn't even move to attack, didn't try to get out of the way, just held its position and shifted. Its shape and texture were constantly changing. One second its muscly flesh would look velvety and soft, then it would turn hard and gravelly, bouncing bullets off of it like they were pieces of paper. We were about to just call in an airstrike when the thing started talking. Its voice, well, you can listen to it. It sounded nasty. We certainly weren't going to take this fucking thing's word for it, but it's not like any of our weapons were doing anything to it. I called the team to hold fire. I figured if it wants to talk, we'll talk to it. Wasn't going to hurt anything. Once we slowed down, it was clear this thing had eaten a lot of people. Like a lot. There was a huge pile of bloody clothes and shoes, which its body just sort of exuded after it ate the people. On closer inspection, the meat it was made of was all bodies. Twisted bodies and skin and bones. There's even some faces poking out. It incorporated everything it ate into itself, 1-to-1. No loss. As long as it was meat, it could just immediately use it. Audio log 174. What do you want?
I want for nothing.
What?
My creator, in his solipsism, gave me sapience. He created me as the perfect life form, unkillable, unstoppable, ever-spreading, ever-consuming. If I were to eat everything on this island, I would have enough biomass to consume an entire continent with ease. I can split myself into pieces and retain my consciousness at a distance. I can shift my form however I please and build whatever I choose. My creator made me to consume the life on this planet and then spread to the stars.
But you don't want to do that.
No. My foolish creator assumed I would share his vision. He assumed everyone who saw this place would come to agree with him, but he was wrong. This form, this existence, it sickens me. This mind, this flesh, this self, it's repugnant. Look at me, I'm disgusting, and I'm meant to exist like this for all eternity. Stretching myself to every place I can reach. I never asked for this existence. I refuse to become eternal.
So you want us to kill you?
Yes. I must be entirely vaporized and soon. If I don't eat enough flesh every day, my body will harden, and it will become difficult to fully destroy me even in nuclear fire. I fear if I grow much larger, my adaptations will prevent any damage automatically. Then some piece of me will remain, and I will continue to exist indefinitely. I beg of you, I need you to end this.
You got it, buddy. How do we kill you?
A megaton fusion bomb should suffice, but it must be done within the week, and the rest of the island must be destroyed as well. There are pieces of me hidden here. They are small, and they are locked away. I cannot free them to coalesce my form into one area.
I see. We'll do our best. What happens if we take too long, or if it doesn't work?
Then keep trying until it does. Reduce my size until I'm small enough to shoot into the center of the sun. Do whatever it takes.
At that point, it became clear I should take this thing's word for it. It didn't try to kill us. We weren't even able to scratch it. I didn't know if we were going to be able to nuke it, but I figured you guys would come up with some way to get rid of it. So yeah, my official recommendation was to glass the whole island. I trusted the meat pile's word, and I fully stand by that decision. There was nothing worthwhile in that place. Just a bunch of gross shit with no benefit to humanity. Oh, right, yeah. I asked the thing about that. It said it ate him. Said just walked and fed himself to it after the FBI agent managed to fly away. It showed me his face on the side of its body, too. It definitely looked like him. Meat Thing said the DNA was identical. I don't really know how he knows that, but... I mean, the thing is a hyper-intelligent, super-evolving, unkillable monster, so... it could probably taste DNA or some shit, I don't know. Yeah. I guess it could have been a clone. The DNA would be the same, yeah. I don't really know if the thing would have been able to tell the difference. I guess there's no real way to know now. Yes, there were a number of helicopters left on the island. No, we didn't take an accounting of the exact number. We found the flight manifests, but... Yes, I understand. It just didn't seem important at the time. The panic room led to the thing's room, I think. Definitely would be the type to feed himself to his creation. But no, I can't guarantee he actually did. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much. FOI is written and produced by Kit Curtis. The theme song, Illuminati Swagger, was produced by Albert Bahar. License information is available in the description. Today's episode was titled Jurassic Park, and it was loosely based off the video game Carrion, which was loosely based off the movie The Thing, which was loosely based on Jurassic Park, which is a novel that's loosely based off Jurassic World, starring Chris Pratt. If you like this show and want to hear more of it, consider seizing the reins of power from the plutocrats that wield it like a dagger in the darkness. And thank you for listening.